So, Nigel, your book. First of all, tell me a bit about yourself. Tell me about how you got into writing.
How I got in? Oh gosh, I've always done writing. My first published poem came out when I was all of 8 years old. I mean, it was only a
Yeah.
school production. I suspect the sales didn't go beyond devoted parents. But I've always been writing one thing or another. I was I've got a you know academic background as well, so there's a book based on my PhD, which again didn't sell very well. Theology not being everybody's cup of tea, um, but I got into writing well mainly since my divorce actually, when I sort of moved down or back down to the Midlands, and was encouraged with the people I was staying with at the time to, finish some scribblings I'd started.
Mm.
Um, but also I went back to a question my 8-year-old asked me. Just after a Christmas Carol concert he'd done with his school, and his 6-year-old brother was there as well. They'd just sung "Good King Wenceslas looked out on the feast of Stephen" and all the rest. But what my eldest really wanted to know was who's the page? You
Yeah.
know, hear the page and stand by me. Well, who was he? What was he doing? And everything else. And I'd done some research and I tried to find out a bit about him, and I had a name. He's called Padavin.
Oh,
I had a bit of information. He wasn't a little boy. He was sort of more of a bodyguard, and steward and those sort of things. But the title was Page. The book, uh, the the book I found in English about it, Good Humans, that's the real story, still called him Page, even though, that wasn't what we tend to think of as Page.
yeah.
Um, so I'd tinkered with it. I'd tried to write a few things. Sort of someone had suggested, oh, perhaps we'll make this could become a film, and all sorts of things. But I'd never actually finished it. And now essentially retired, and I was able to, put the hours in and actually uh, get it finished. And
How long ago is it? Well, how long has it been in development, shall we say?
16 years. My
Right.
sons are now in their 20s.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether they're just pleased or pleased and relieved that I was able to send them the cover design and say, "Look, we've got this far." Because I'm meeting someone um, tomorrow to talk about actually uploading the files, so we can actually get a publication date very soon. It'll be March. Um, you
You've got
know,
a publisher.
I'm publishing with Resolute Books. It's a sort of halfway house
Right.
between self-publishing and an actual publisher, because
Yeah.
they do editing and you have to be peer reviewed to make sure that it's decent enough to publish. And you have to pass the test, to make sure
Yeah.
you're good enough or your work is good enough. And they just make sure that yeah, it is good enough to be out there.
So will it be
Um,
on sale in Waterstones alongside all the other authors that are in that shop? There's many thousands.
there are many thousands. Certainly not initially. It'll be Amazon. But you will be able to go and
Mm.
sort of look it up on Amazon, either under my name, Nigel Oakley, or Warrior Princess Errant Page, which is what the book is actually called. Um, that it'll take a bit longer before we get to the stage of Waterstones and everything else, simply because you've got to get printed, as I understand it,
Yeah.
and you have to go down a different route. Um,
So you
I
will
will
be able
be
to buy a physical copy.
from Amazon, yes.
Yeah.
As I say, initially it'll be just Amazon, but then hopefully later on, particularly once because I'm at the moment I'm writing book two, so there is a sequel. Well, it's hopefully going to be a trilogy in the end, but book two is on the way. So I would hope sooner or later you will be able to go into Waterstones and say, "Can I have a copy of Nigel Oakley's book?" But yeah, not at the moment. Insofar as uploading files I can do in the middle of a house move, but trying to organize a printer and everything else is it's going to take a bit more time. That's
That's
all.
going to be the
Not that
icing
I'm
on the
against
cake.
Waterstones. I shop in Waterstones myself, so
Yeah,
um,
that's like I say, that's going to be the icing on the cake, shall we say, when
yeah,
it comes around to it. So
yeah.
you've alluded to the plots. Don't tell it too much because we need to read it. But what's the book about?
Um, well, let me read you the back cover blurb, which I hope will set the scene. Um, Warrior Princess and Errant Page is set in the days when good King Wenceslas ruled Bohemia. The story of Emma, the warrior princess, and Pedavin, the errant page, is told against a background of 10th century court intrigue, personality clashes, and warfare. Can a 22-year-old page and bodyguard avenge the death of his assassinated king while being hunted as an outlaw? Can an Anglo-Saxon princess, stuck hundreds of miles from home in a foreign court, follow her heart when her husband doesn't want her? Will Emma and Pedavin be able to find a secure future in such a deadly, dangerous world? Um, in other words, I found a connection between Alfred the Great and Good King Wenceslas,
Right,
insofar as Alfred the Great's granddaughter was sent across to marry into Good King Wenceslas's family.
right. So
And
is it
carry on.
fact or fiction?
It is fiction, but based on a few facts that I have been able to gather.
Right.
The trouble with someone like Good King Wenceslas, especially by the time you've come over here, is that there isn't that much information um, other than sort of very general stuff, and a lot of it has been mythologized. The medieval monks have got hold of the myths and the legends and tried, in my opinion, to make Wenceslas out as being sort of virtually perfect,
Hmm.
which none of us are. And and you get things like, on the one hand, he was unmarried and didn't have any kids or anything else, but on the other hand, he had a wife and child.
Hmm.
You can't have both of those true at the same time.
No.
So as a novelist, I just plumped for one, because although I felt I could be true to the facts that Wenceslas was assassinated by his then pagan brother, and his brother Boleslav actually took over Bohemia. Um, I didn't think I could happily have Boleslav killing a whole family, including a young baby.
No. No.
Uh,
Wasn't Wenceslas lived in what we now know as Czechoslovakia?
Czechia, yes, the Czech Republic, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, it's not exact, but that is the case. His capital was Prague, which is the capital of the Czech Republic. And you've got Wenceslas Square in there and all that. And it is that Wenceslas that is being referred to. And so yes, it is that area, but you've got to try and imagine it's the 900s, and you've got this princess. Okay, she's a princess, so she'll have traveled in comfort for the journey across, but basically it was horseback or carried in a
Mm.
litter, between two horses or whatever. Yeah, so not what we'd call comfortable.
It's bizarre that we have this legend or this tale of this king who was Eastern European, and
Yeah.
we talk about it a lot in this country, which um, to you as a novelist must be quite difficult in circumstances in trying to get the facts from the fiction.
Well, don't try and get the facts from fiction from my book. I mean, whenever there has been gaps or wherever there have been conflicts, I've just gone with the story. I mean, there's no evidence that Pedavin, well, there's no evidence that I've found that Pedavin was necessarily related to Wenceslas, but
Hmm.
I've made them second cousins because that helped the flow of the novel, the story. Um, and and I've created a half brother for Pedavin who's not very nice and all that sort of thing. But I have based it around, Emma is a real person, though I
Hmm.
have used her European name rather than her Anglo-Saxon one, simply because her Anglo-Saxon one would be difficult for us to pronounce
Yeah.
nowadays. But I have evidence that I used uh, Alison Alison Weir's book about the genealogy of um, British royal families in
Hmm.
order to check the facts that, oh yes, yes, she did go out and she was, but I made it up.
Yeah.
um, it was um, on the grounds that I am writing a novel. There is no actual evidence that the carol is based on anything that actually happened
Uh,
either.
yeah.
Um, though some historians argue it seems likely on the grounds that Wenceslas was a Christian and was known for doing weird things like supporting the poor. Uh,
Yeah.
and But given where my whole research started from my sons asking about who the page was, having
Hmm.
just sung the carol, I felt I had to do a version of the carol within my story. Um, but again, I made it up, not least because the carol doesn't mention Princess Emma being with Wenceslas and the page,
Hmm.
but in my
Hmm.
story, she's there. Because we meet the peasant and we meet the whole peasant family, which includes a baby. And the whole story just flows from there. And we have a relationship build up between Pedavin and Emma, which in theory shouldn't happen because Emma's supposed to be marrying somebody else. Um, that someone else being sort of Boleslav's son, which is very confusing because he's also called Boleslav.
Yeah.
So,
Funny enough,
um,
for a second book in there, so you've clearly got a lot out of it.
yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I had enough time to get stuff out of it, but it became fascinating, and I mean, the amount of stuff I had to ditch in order to make it a story about Pedavin and Emma, not
Hmm.
about Wenceslas, not about Boleslav, not about Saxony. Um, but that is one of those things, um, because it's making sure that people have something that they can read and enjoy, which I hope they will do.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, as with all novels, you have the process of editing, you have the process of uh, well, if you go by Resolute, you have the process of peer reviewing.
Mm.
Um, so it has been read by at least five professionals.
All right.
Who, well, I had two editors, and I've had three peer reviewers all go through and make their comments, which I've taken on board and sorted out in order to make sure that the story flows. Um, and yeah, Emma and Padavin's future at the end. Well, there's scope, as you say, for novel number two.
Oh, right. So, how do your sons think about it? Have they read it? Have they given a view on it?
They've not read, no, they haven't actually. They've seen the cover, they've read the blurb.
Yeah.
Um, and what I'm planning on doing is once I get the files up to Amazon, I will be ordering myself my own book,
Yeah.
so I can then send them their copies, as a present because it's for them. It's
Mm.
dedicated to them. I mean, it is now, I think what you would call a young adult book, stroke adult book,
Mm.
rather than a child's book, because they grew up, um,
As all kids
and
tend to do.
that's all kids tend to do. Yes, it's terrible, isn't it? Um, so yeah, so has that's what has happened, and it's become a fascinating project. And I mean, I've learned as well. I'm
Mm.
a sort of, as it were, a former academic who's had to learn how to write fiction, and you have to sort of let a lot of things go in order to make sure you are telling a story. And I've enjoyed doing that, and going
It's the
backwards and
start of
forwards.
a new career, do you think?
Yes. Yeah, I mean,
It's
I've got
maybe
I've
or
got loads of other ideas as well. So,
right.
but the trouble is, it actually takes time to write a
Yeah.
100,000 words or so, um, and inevitably, when you write that much, you do have to involve other people to look at it and say, well, actually, this little bit doesn't quite work. What if you do this, that, or the other? And usually, very annoyingly, they're right.
Yeah.
So you do have to you change things and everything else. I mean, in earlier versions, I mean, I will be honest, Emma was a bit of a cipher, but she's now a fully fleshed out, and in fact starts the novel,
Mm.
um, stuck in Chippenham, having to fight off an attack by some Welsh outlaws. Um, so, you know,
So the whole thing's been a huge learning curve, obviously, both
oh
for you
yes,
and for the book.
yeah,
And so it's obviously given you an interest and given you a direction, which I'd imagine that once you've started, you sort of can't let go, and it develops and develops into other things as you go along.
yeah. Well, yes, and there's now a whole bookshelf of books related more more or less closely to the Czech Republic and its history and life in medieval times and
Yeah,
how you traveled and everything else. But some things you need to learn from experts. I have a neighbor a few doors down where I live who goes riding, and at one stage in an earlier version, I had David and Emma on the same horse, and she was saying, "I don't care how often you see that in films. That's blooming uncomfortable."
yeah, yeah, yeah. Quite hard to
Um,
do.
yeah. Uh, so I had to change that.
Yeah,
I mean, I make reference to it as sort of yes, in an emergency, he could have hauled her up on his horse and they could have got away. But for a long distance ride back to Saxony, sort of, there's no way. We need another horse. Let's go and find one. Um, but until in a sense, until I'd written it and someone I knew about riding more than me. I mean, I've been on the back of a
Yeah.
horse, but it's a while ago now. Um, until someone who knew more than me could say, actually, you know, that's not clever. Even if
Mm.
the horse is strong enough for that to be done, it's still not clever.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, you live and you learn.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't know what you don't know.